he's at that level. He's top 4, top 5 in Spain, and he's certainly top 4, top 5 teams if he comes to the English Premier League. He's the kind of player you might have to watch for 4 or 5 games before you realise what he actually does and what he brings to the team. He's like the plug in the bath where everything else is swirling around. He keeps all the water together in there as well.
Rob, thank you for joining us here on this Anfield today. Obviously, we're here to talk about Martin Zubimendi. What can you tell us about him then? As I always do, and probably not as au fait with him as a Spanish football expert like yourself is. What's his style of play? What's he all about?
Well, I did put it out on Twitter yesterday that you'd be signing somebody who I guess plays the Declan Rice role or plays the role of Rodri for Manchester City, or maybe with Liverpool, a kind of player that has been happy to hold the midfield like Jordan Henderson. He's not the kind of guy that's going to come into any club flying all over the place, scoring 40-yard goals, spraying passes from corner to corner. He's a very technical, disciplined player. He's the kind of man that takes the ball off his defenders and makes a good, safe pass. He's a link man in midfield when the team are going forward. If you close your eyes and imagine him anywhere on the field of play, then you close your eyes, you open your eyes again, and he's going to be standing somewhere in the centre circle, probably just on the edge of his own centre circle if they're defending, and maybe somewhere in the other centre circle watching the other team go screaming forward if they're attacking. So it's probably a player that Liverpool really haven't had since Fabinho. Last year, 1 or 2 players took it in turns to play in that position. Maybe Bayetic can play in that position in years to come, but he's only 19 years of age, isn't he? 19 going on 20. And this guy's 24, 25. So he's the understudy in the national team to Rodri of Manchester City, and is the next best thing that Spain has got. He's a player that Barcelona desperately wanted to sign last year. Xavi made it pretty clear that he was on his wish list, but Barcelona couldn't afford him. Looks like Barcelona will be able to afford a couple of players this week, but logic has gone out of the window. But yeah, he's a good player, and he will be the kind of player that Liverpool have been signing years ago when they're signing somebody who is still ripe. He's not quite the real deal yet, and there's room for improvement, but he's a developing player who's at international level.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. If you look at the Liverpool squad, it kind of stacked with promising players at one end of the spectrum, and then the other where it's players that are probably past their best or past their peak, whereas he's a player that's just about to enter his prime years. I'm sure that it went down really well when you referred to him as being a Jordan Henderson or a Declan Rice, by the way. But where would he fit in then at Liverpool? It seems to me that he might not have really fit if it was Jurgen Klopp that was in charge now, because he's after a different style of midfield. But whereas all the things that we've heard in pre-season, from the likes of Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott, the way that Schlott wants his midfield to play is much more on the ball, and the centre midfielders to be, in Curtis Jones's words, more than just runners.
Well, I think if you've got a Zubimendi in your team, or a Declan Rice in your team, or a Jordan Henderson, they're kind of player that allow the other players, the ball players, to go screaming forward. Even the likes of the fullbacks. If we get Trent Alexander-Arnold fit again for Liverpool, you got Andy Robertson flying and fit, then their fullbacks go screaming down there. Then you're left with 2 central defenders. He's the kind of guy that's happy to be a security guy that just sits at the back with them, keeps them company, and sees the others going screaming forward. I know Endo did it to a certain extent last year, but he was maybe a bit of a panic buy at the start of the season. But he's the kind of the guy that can come in there and he will hold the position. He's a good technical player, and to describe him, he's like the plug in the bath where everything else is swirling around. He keeps all the water together in there as well.
So we hear a lot about his strengths, and one of the things that is seemingly a strength that surprised me, given his sort of height, and he's very good in the air. But what would be like the concerns in terms of what's his weaknesses or areas that he needs to improve? You sort of spoke about his age and his profile there. What would be the things that he would need to maybe adapt or improve? And also for going from the Spanish game to the Premier League?
If you look at, like any player that comes to the English Premier League, you're looking at the pace of the game. He's played at Real Sociedad. They did brilliantly last year. They played in the Champions League. And they got to, was it the last 16 there against Paris Saint-Germain? So he's used to playing at the highest level. He certainly handled himself well when he was playing against the likes of Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid and Barcelona. So he's used to the very high standards of top European football. But I guess it's the hurly-burly, the speed of the Premier League, the week in, week out. And also the instant judgment that you get moving for a team like Real Sociedad, who are expected to be 5th or 6th in the league, to a team like Liverpool, who are expected at least to be next season to be in the top 4 and making great ground as well when it comes to progress in the Champions League.
I guess the one big player that we're always going to inevitably associate him with given his journey and also the sort of ringing endorsement that he's given him already, is Xabi Alonso. Now, I don't know, you've watched a lot more than me, that he doesn't quite seem like a Xabi Alonso that can spray a 50, 60-yard pass across field beauty like that. But are there similarities with Alonso there, or is that just a 2 plus 2 equaling the wrong five?
If you put a list of things where he resembles Xabi Alonso, it's a player who'd be coming over from Spain and a club there's been and a club where they develop players brilliant like Xabi Alonso was. He plays in midfield. He's making a step up from Real Sociedad to Liverpool Football Club, and he's played for Spain already, and a number of top Spanish clubs have been looking at him. But that's where the similarities end. When he comes on, he's the kind of player you might have to watch for 4 or 5 games before you realise what he actually does and what he brings to the team. He doesn't hit balls from 30 yards out. He doesn't actually go crunching into tackles either. Not that Xabi Alonso necessarily did that. And he doesn't spray the ball out to the wings, Glenn Hoddle like. But what he is an effective player. He allows other players to play in the team. He's a very technical player. When there are 2 balls on and they're trying to get the ball to the strikers and maybe out to the wing, he's the third and the safe pass. He's always in the equation. If you take a picture of the team having a move, he's always in the picture. He may not be the one that they go to, but he'll be the player that gives them an option in there as well. So no, the comparisons to Xabi Alonso, there are none. They're more Fabinho. He is not the kind of player that's going to get you on the edge of your seat. But what he is a security guard that comes in that allows other players to play in the team. I'm not saying he's a great footballer, because he plays nice passes and he can thread a ball through and he can see a pass, but he's not fancy down.
You definitely sort of concrete firmed up what I suspected. So if he's not quite like Xabi Alonso, you kind of mentioned a couple there. Who is he like? Who, past or present in terms of midfielders that holding number 6 profile?
Well, I guess, if you're talking Liverpool terms, is like the job that Fabinho did for Liverpool when he was at his best at the club. If you're looking at players that have done his role superbly well over the last couple of years, it's Busquets. He's not exactly the same as Busquets. He's probably technically better with the ball at making passes than Sergio Busquets, who kind of invented that role at Barcelona and Spain and became popular. And in recent years, playing that, as we call it now, the number 6 role, the midfield destroyers role, Casemiro, who did an incredible job for the best part of a decade at Real Madrid as well. Okay, he's not been the same kind of player at Manchester United, but then again, who has? But he's that kind of player that comes in and wins the ball in midfield. He's probably where Rodri was at a couple of years ago when he signed for Manchester City, that Rodri came in with a certain amount of improvement still in him, and that Rodri could win a ball, he could make a tackle, he could hold that position. And then what we're seeing from Rodri at Manchester City as a coach, Pep Guardiola, and hopefully Liverpool have that in Arne's slot, that can then take him to the next level, giving that bit more confidence. And playing with better players as well is going to develop his game. But hardly anybody noticed when it came to the European Championship final, when Rodri went off, who everybody was saying was the key player for Spain and arguably one of the best players in the world, maybe a Ballon d'Or contender. He came on for the second half and guided Spain all the way to beating England. So I say a Declan Rice kind of player, but on that performance, he's a more successful kind of player.
Absolutely nailed it there. I was actually going to say about the Rodri part and how is the sort of understudy to him at Spain at the moment, and I need to find it. I need to look it up, but I swear it might have been Rio Ferdinand at the start of the second half who said in the BBC commentary, kind of like, "Oh, Rodri's gone off and this guy's come on. The England players will be rubbing their hands and seeing this as an opportunity," along those sort of lines. And obviously, to most people, they watched that game and Zubimendi just was, absolute showed his quality. So there's not a major difference there between him and Rodri. Hopefully, like you say, he progresses the way that he did. Just about him as a player, as a person rather than a player. What do you know? What can you tell us maybe about his temperament? Liverpool have been pretty heavy on doing their due diligence in the background and finding out about the player. Everything that we hear from Spain is that he's a quite an intelligent lad, very well liked by the Sociedad supporters, but also by his teammates.
Yeah, I think he's the typical kind of Edwards and Richard Hughes has come in as the director of football. I think he's the kind of player that they, as you say, they've done their due diligence. They've looked at him. You think of when Sane, Mo Salah came into the club, even Coutinho, even Van Dijk, and Alisson. These were players that we knew of from foreign leagues, but they hadn't hit the heights. They weren't really established top-class international players, and Liverpool took them to the next level. And he's a player that has come through their system. They've got the most successful youth system in the whole of Europe at Real Sociedad in developing players, bringing them through into the first team, getting them in the Spain national team as well. And it has been a steady progress over probably 4 or 5 seasons. Last season, he hardly missed a game right up to the end of the season where he picked up a bit of an injury just before the Euros, but I think he played 50-odd matches. He's got a good temperament as well. Somebody who's making tackles and getting involved and destroying the opposition in midfield. He's not one of those players that serves a lot of suspensions or is ever likely to get himself red carded. So he's a disciplined player. He's a good professional. And maybe the fact that we're talking about it now and he hasn't yet signed on the dotted line for Liverpool. At some clubs, if they knew there was a chance to go to Liverpool, then they would, they'd pick up an illness knowing the team is going to be playing in Germany this week. Just finding a reason not to go into training. And he's been there this week on the training ground with the other players that may be linked to be leaving Real Sociedad, joining in training and continuing as if, the deal may or may not happen. So what you're signing is if Liverpool get him, you're signing an already proven international player, somebody who has played in the Champions League, somebody whose best days are ahead of him, but has had a good last 18 months or so, and probably in a position where Liverpool, if they do have any weaknesses, they need a player like that. McAllister did a great job last year, but if you're asking about comparisons to Xabi Alonso, I would say that McAllister is more like Xabi Alonso than potentially Zubimendi, who's coming in. Zubimendi, going back a few years, might be like a Ray Kennedy or a Tommy Smith or a Fabinho, if you want to put it into Liverpool parlance.
Well, I mean, you used the Alonso McAllister comparison there, so maybe he's the Mascherano to the
other player. Yeah, you brought it in there, Mascherano. Yeah, Mascherano played that position for Liverpool, and he's like that. He's not quite as tigerish as Mascherano, and has the dirty tricks. Of course, reinvented himself as a defender when he went to Barcelona. But he's that kind of player. But he's not the tiger. He's not the nasty in the nicest sense of word. He's not the kind of player that's there and he's getting really involved. But he's the player that's holding it all together. When you come up against him, it's like you're facing 3 players because he has so much presence on the field.
Yeah, maybe we'll see a Rafa version 2.0 here with like the 2 midfielders and then a number 10 that maybe becomes like Szoboszlai's role and 4-2-3-1 more style. Really interesting. Just finally, then, just on the off chance that this doesn't get over the line, what can you tell us about the sort of moves that he has turned down in the past? Then, obviously, there was the interest from Barcelona, and we're led to believe that maybe Arsenal and maybe Chelsea were interested before too.
I think you'd certainly come onto the radar of Chelsea because they're looking for value in players and giving these kind of lifetime contracts and signing players out of their deals and whatever it is, 55, 60 million euros, depending on the exchange rate. That's a very good value. I'm not sure whether you have to actually pay the full amount, whereas Chelsea like to kind of spread it over a number of years. I think Arsenal are looking at his teammate, Mikel Merino, had that short spell at Newcastle at a similar age, who again is part of the ballast of a very successful Real Sociedad team. Xavi Hernandez, when he was the manager of Barcelona, made it very clear that he was on his hit list if he could afford him. Xavi at that point just didn't have the money and didn't have the resources to take him to Barcelona. And he's certainly what he's lacking in the Barcelona team at the moment. But Barca somehow this week have found 60 million euros to sign Dani Olmo, but they can't register him. So I think if in normal times, going back 5-10 years, Barcelona would have been the natural move. He would have gone in there as a long-term successor to Sergio Busquets, and that kind of, they call it a number 5 position over there, number 6 as we talk. Real Madrid have got a couple of players like that. Otherwise, I'm sure he would be on the radar of Real Madrid. They've got the likes of Tchouaméni, even Jude Bellingham can play in that position as well. So it would be surplus to Real Madrid. But he's at that level. He's top 4, top 5 in Spain, and he's certainly top 4, top 5 teams if he comes to the English Premier League.